You were talking on the radio the other day about Connor Davis and Kai Murphy. Can you just go into a little more about them and what you've seen from them this fall?
Yeah. Yeah, first with Connor, I think really kind of a unique ability for someone to blend in so quickly. And you can tell that he's a mature kid. He's played in a good conference in the SEC. He's played at a high level, played in a World Series. So the on-field stuff has been certainly a welcome addition. But what I mean by the ability to blend so quickly is I've not seen like a guy come into a program, pretty good culture, pretty well established, and then just fit in and not miss a beat. In fact, I would say really kind of identified himself as a leader. So I think he's going to give us contributions, certainly in the lineup, certainly in a positional, but also is going to be able to supply some of the leadership qualities, some experience that maybe we lost in great numbers with some of those guys last year. Kai Murphy, the Murphy name obviously is no stranger. It's not strange to the Sun Devil baseball program. We'd seen Kai, a little bit certainly in high school, both a position player and pitcher. And I will be very honest with you, when we were exploring the transfer option of allowing Kai to come here and be a part of the program, we were probably looking at him more as a pitcher. But if I had to say today, based on what we've seen in the fall, he's certainly going to contribute on the mound, but he's done a really, really good job in the outfield and is playing solid baseball up to this point. And if you are going to make me make a decision, I would say he's probably going to help us more on the position player side, which again was in conflict of what we originally thought. So both of those guys are going to add very nicely to what we have with some of the younger guys for this year.
Michael.
Hey, Coach. What have you seen out of Joe Lampe so far? He's a guy that originally went to UC Davis and then at the last minute decided to go back to junior college in Santa Rosa, and he put up big numbers. What have you seen out of him? And then in general, what have you seen from guys what's the difference in guys that you see coming out of high school versus coming out of a junior college?
Well, specifically with Joe, he's very, very fast. He's probably our fastest guy on the team. He's been our swing man. We've been able to bounce him around. We put him at third. We put him at second. We've moved him around. He's playing center field now for us. So we like his versatility. He's a left-handed bat. He puts pressure on the defense every single time he puts the ball in play. Relative to guys coming out of junior college or high school, I think the one concern we knew we had a really, really good recruiting class coming in with some very talented high school prep kids. But one of the things that we lost last year in a large amount is we lost a lot of maturity. The transfer, the junior college setting, you've got guys entering your program, Joe included, that have a year of college baseball under their belt already, albeit not Pac-12 baseball, but yet it's still guys that bring college experience. And I think that's going to really, really help and allow our younger guys who are super talented to grow at a pace that's comfortable for them, where we don't necessarily have to throw them into the fire. So Joe's added some stability there.
Jacob.
Hey, Tracy, you said on the radio a couple days ago that the catching department was a little bit beat up right now, and you mentioned that Sam was still working back from the knee injury, and Logan was dealing with something. I'm just curious on an update from just what's going on with them and what the health status is of those two guys.
Well, right now we're limited in the fall. Guys have some injuries. We're bringing them back at a pace that's not going to jeopardize any, add to future injuries. But we feel that if we can get guys back healthy and to a point of competition, which right now the target for that clearly is February of the season, then we're going to have, I believe, one of the better catching corps in the country, because you're going to have a blend of experience in Sam Ferry. And truth be told on him, we'll probably have him hopefully cleared by the end of fall ball and fully cleared. So, but we're just not going to push that part of it. So we've been limiting his reps. We have Nick Chima, who, eventually was inserted into the starter role last year because of some of the injuries. So feel he's very capable because he caught for top 10 team last year. And you mentioned Logan Poston, the freshman. He, has been battling some injuries. We're going to take the time to allow him to rehab and get back in shape, and hopefully, we'll have him by the season, because just the limited stuff we've seen with him, his receiving is certainly a high level. And then the guy too that we don't talk about that's also being able to swing around is Nate Baez. He's done a really, really good job. So if you take all of those names, the big if in that is make sure everybody's healthy by the season. But we've got some wonderful options back there, and we think by February we'll be where we want to be and need to be with regard to catching. It's made it a little challenging right now. In fact, we kind of spread out some of our inter squads and stuff in the fall because we've been limited in terms of the bodies we can have back there. And we don't want to wear out Achima. Sam's been progressing and catching more and more day by day, but we have to be a little strategic in that this fall just because of the injuries.
Garrett.
How's it going, Coach? Good morning. I know you mentioned a little bit, a little bit of the lack of maturity that you guys maybe might have this year, losing some guys, but does it also feel like maybe you guys are bringing in some new weapons that you could use that allows you to use those new weapons for sure for this year?
Yeah. I mean, I think we're going to be a different team. I think, the pitching piece of it, we're always going to start there. We lost Abovich, but we returned pretty much, all the arms, and then with the addition of some of the new arms. So we like what we've seen so far on the pitching side of it. I think offensively, defensively, where we don't have the Torkelsons of the world, they're going to hit 25. I think we're going to be a more balanced team top to bottom. But that stuff we're not going to truly know until the springtime, because fall ball still fall ball, but we like what we've seen. I mean, it's just a different. You're never going to replace those types of guys, but I don't feel you have to replace. You can still create a different identity with certainly a different skill set. And we think we've done that. So I think I like what I've seen defensively, and I like what I've seen offensively. We may not be waiting back for the 3-run homer. We're going to have guys who are going to hit home runs. Don't get me wrong, but it's just going to be a different style and maybe how we approach our offense this year than we did in the past. So. And I'll say in your reference of maturity, and I know it's my words. I'm not saying you were wrong. When I'm saying maturity, I guess I'm more speaking towards just age. The really cool part about when you look at our freshman class, we've got some young guys, but I love their actual intellectual baseball maturity. They're pretty advanced. Hunter Haas and Jack Moss and some of the guys, just a few Ethan Long. Those guys have a clue, but they're going to be allowed to kind of season themselves before having to come in and carry the load of the team.
Alex.
Hey, Coach. What is Drew Swift sort of, maturity or leadership skills? How have they sort of grown? And then what's the left side of the infield looking like?
Yeah, I'll tell you, Drew Swift, we were just talking about this, just talking the other night about, he has been, the influence that he's had on our team has been beyond, honestly, anything I've seen in college baseball. Just because in our sport, if we had unusual circumstances with COVID. I mean, it took a 40-round draft and reduced it to 5. He could have signed. He could have done all that. But there's this interesting piece, the psychological piece of coming back as a senior in college baseball. We've talked about this before amongst this group, that sometimes that's viewed as a failure. But he didn't do that. And he's not taken a cavalier attitude with it. Like, he has embraced his role of a veteran on this team. You saw his play last year through 17 games. He had made a huge jump and was playing on a high level. And I will tell you, he has not missed a beat. In fact, he's better than he was last year. And what I love, though, is just that leadership. He literally is like another coach on the field. He's helping, teaching the young guys that surround him. So he's been a tremendous influence. The left side of the infield, I think we have some options. I mean, Hunter Haas, freshman's been a good player. Baez, we've been able to move around, but we have some guys that we feel are capable of playing the left side. But right now, Drew Swift is our shortstop, and we will, we'll move the pieces around that as we see guys play more.
Jacob.
We had heard that Eric Tolman had added a couple miles per hour to his stuff and was a guy last year who really stood out early in the season. And what have you seen from him in the fall, and just how do you project him as far as what he's going to be capable of doing this year based on what you've seen so far?
Yeah, I mean, he's made a jump. You know, the velocity certainly has ticked up, but um, but where the jump that we've seen is just maturity and being able to locate the off-speed stuff. The command is certainly improved from last year. We feel he has a chance, based on what we've seen so far, to be certainly a high-end front of the rotation potential guy in the Pac-12, and that's ultimately what guys strive to be. So I think he's put himself in position to do that. But yeah, we like the improvement that we've seen, not just on the velocity side, but just the whole ability to pitch and compete and understand everything else that goes with the art of pitching. He's made considerable improvements and jumps with that.
Dave Swartz.
Coach, how does the eligibility rules and getting guys back for an extra year help you? And then is in particular for the guys that didn't get a full first season of college baseball, how do you think that'll deal with this year?
It's interesting. I mean, I think it impacted certainly last year some of the roster movement when you take the 40-round draft and move that down to 5. I apologize. I guess I just said the draft is more of an influence than the COVID legislation. The COVID legislation for our sport, baseball, in particular, a place like Arizona State, I don't anticipate us getting those years back, those extra years of eligibility, because as they expand the draft, which I believe they're going to, I don't think it's just my opinion, but I don't think it's going to be a 5-round draft again moving forward. Everything I'm hearing probably closer to 20. So if we're on the right guys, or we're doing what we're supposed to from a development standpoint, this has been throughout the career, not just COVID. You don't get guys traditionally as seniors anyway. So I don't think it has a huge impact with our roster. I think it's, some other rosters around the country in baseball, probably. What's going to be really interesting to see is with the expanded roster legislation. Now, I'm not going to say that we didn't take advantage of that this year, because we did, as witnessed by some of the transfers that we added to our roster. We have, the NCAA says you have an unlimited roster this year. I don't see it being an unlimited roster next year. I see it being a 35-man again. So I think what's going to be really interesting is when you see the roster movement at the end of this year, the 2021 season, more so than what you saw this year.
Jeff. Jeff McIntyre.
Sorry. Yeah. To get to the point where you have your pitching to be a strength of the team coming back in. I mean, it's been kind of a long build. Can you just really talk about that and what Jason has done, kind of going into his second year?
Well, I think it's a combination. I think it's a combination of a good plan, and then being able to execute that plan. And what you're always trying to look for in any coaching scenario is buy-in from the team. And what I've noticed with the pitching staff, and maybe a little different from years gone by, is I think he's got a really good ability of communicating with the guys, and they're setting the expectations and requiring those guys to live up to the expectations, where there's this sense of they don't want to disappoint him. So through that, just observation from a head coaching and years of experience, you can see that interaction is real, is sincere on both sides. So that's one thing. I think the other part of it is just in the recruiting piece of it. When you can establish some success on the mound, and you can show and demonstrate success like we did last year, that also lends itself to favorable recruiting. That you're not just identified as, hey, I want to go to Arizona State because I'm going to become a better hitter. They're always good on offense. I think we're starting to turn the corner a little bit there in getting more arms here that identify Arizona State, that, hey, I can develop as a pitcher there as well. So, through the middle of that, through some of the transitions, certainly early in our coaching career here, the current staff coaching career on the pitching side, some of those things were in flux. And from a recruiting perspective, it was a little challenging. But I like the fact that we're settled now, and I think that's just going to continue to feed itself. So, again, I think it's a combination of what's being done on the field, but also what's being done behind the scenes with regard to recruiting.
Jacob.
I'm just to kind of build off of that. I'm curious what your expectations are for your pitching staff, because it is a unit, like you had said, that has been building over a long period of time, and going into this upcoming season, based on what you've seen so far, what are your expectations for that unit, and then perhaps even for the team as a whole?
Well, I mean, anytime, I think the expectations are from a pitching staff is give your team a chance to win. And but for me to sit here and say, we want to have a top 5 ERA in the country, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I want us to put our team in a position to win as many baseball games as possible. And through the process, the everyday process, I think all of those individual statistics, all of those team statistics on the team side will play out. So, my simple answer to that is, I expect, our pitching staff to give us a chance to win every single night. Now, knowing that's not going to happen all the time, but I think given the quality of arms that we have, given the depth that we have, that we're going to be in a pretty good position to do that. And so, that's just kind of a general sense of the expectations of the pitching staff.
Alex.
I know Aubrey Major was struggling with some injuries during the season, but what's sort of his status right now? And if he's been out there, what sort of tools have you seen?
Well, I mean, he came in as a switch hitter, a big physical kid, has had some success certainly at the Division I level. And then, as you referenced, had some injuries that affected his last season and ability to get drafted. But we like what we've seen so far. Up to this point, we think it's in his best interest and our best interest that maybe we focus on the left side, hitting from the left side. He's shown that. He's shown to be a true threat on the left side of the plate. He's thrown together some really good at-bats, and so we like what we're seeing there. He's got some improvements to make on the defensive side, but I would say up to this point, he's probably more offensive than defensive, but he has the ability on the defensive side. I think it's just going to be more reps, and he's still a little banged up on the injury front, so that's prohibited him from his development. But we like what we've seen so far, particularly on the offensive side of it.
Michael.
Yeah, Coach, to get back to the pitching a little bit, I know you're saying the arms and you like what you see, but obviously through the fall, I mean, you want the pitchers to develop that chemistry with the catchers. I know it's early, but I mean, do you like what you see in there with the catchers working with the pitchers and getting a feel how they're going to call their games?
Yeah, we've had to be a little creative in that, and even if catcher's catching and he's limited physically, we'll have the catchers involved in decision-making processes. But, you're talking about, Sam Ferry, who is no stranger to the program, has been around for a while, has a pretty good pulse and heartbeat of what's going on with the pitchers, knows those guys pretty well. Nick Chima, same thing, just through his experiences last year. And Baez on the position player side, we're mixing him in there. But the guy that, we're trying to shorten the learning curve a little bit with is Poshkin. But the injury piece is first and foremost for us right now. But we feel pretty good on the chemistry side of that, just because of the experience and the age of the guys that we anticipate doing the burden of our catching, a couple of the fifth-year senior type.
All right, last two questions. Jacob?
Either on the hitting or the pitching side, who would you say has been the biggest surprise or just the best performer so far in the fall, in your opinion, and either way, pitching or hitting?
It's a good question. I'm speaking from the gut here. I'd say, the guy that's really, I think, has made a jump in style of play, Sean McLean. I mean, Sean McLean has clearly come back stronger, more physical. We've been able to bounce him around. If you recall, we played him some in the outfield last year prior to he had an injury as well. And we kind of been moving him around, but from a defensive standpoint, we feel like we can do the outfield if we need to, but he also gives us some flexibility on the infield side of it. But where I've seen, I think, the most jumps and surprising jumps, not just through average, but also power, have been Sean at the plate. And, that's been kind of fun to see, because usually takes those guys, man, when they're a freshman, it takes them a little bit of time to figure stuff out, settle in, relax, and then you get a better idea of what they're going to be, usually late in their freshman year, which we didn't get last year, or, the beginning of that sophomore year. So he's been I wouldn't say a pleasant surprise, but he's the one from just an eyeball test has made the biggest jump and potentially can make the biggest contributions from what he was doing relative to last year.
Jeff, last question. Jeff, last question.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about McLean, but can you talk a little bit about second base and first base? And then are you seeing a role for Vinny Tosti?
So second base, I mean, we feel like we have some options there, certainly with, McLean and Hunter Haas and even Baez, depending on how the combinations of the lineup. So those guys have given us some options. First base, that's, as you know, had a pretty good one there last year. I always love it. Hey, who are you going to replace him with? Well, you don't replace a guy like that. But we feel like Connor Davis has really been a critical addition because he adds the experience piece, but he's also performing. And he's done that at a high level. We've moved Brian Calmer over to first base because of what we have in the infield, and we feel that's his best chance to certainly help him because Brian's got some certain potential with the bat. And then Jack Moss, freshman Jack Moss, was a first baseman we signed. It's clearly going to push for time there as well. And back to the question before that, I mean, that young man has really made an impression on the staff offensively because he's one of the best bats in the country coming out of the draft last year. It has performed very well for us this fall. And then I think the last part of your question was Vinny Tosti. Vinny's, I mean, in all honesty, has struggled a little bit this fall. Just with, we've asked him to move to right field. I know he's played some center field and things, but he struggled a little bit. But we've been through COVID times, and we're 3 weeks into a fall, so we're going to continue to give him the reps. But what we like about his game is he is athletic, he's fast, he can run, and that old saying in baseball that speed shows up every day. There's always a role for somebody that can run, whether it's pinch run or defensive replacement or whatever it may be. So we'll let that evolve as we continue to practice.
All right, thanks, Coach.